The attack surface is basically how attackers see your organization, your company.
More about thinking outside the box, at least from the attacker perspective.
The unsuspecting devices usually on the network, obviously, that are not considered.
What we see is that attackers go for the weakest link.
Which reminds me of the houses that have like a really nice metal door, but there's a big terrace, a glass wall on the back that's as accessible.
And that's an entry point for an attacker.
Think as an attacker would. And the good news is attackers today, they use commoditized tools.
We have the AI that's like a blend of all of these.
All right, welcome to a new episode of Cybercrime from the Frontline, the only podcast where the experts come up front. We're going to talk about unexpected attack surfaces. This is Dan Verte, your host, and I have with me here Mihai, I have Dragos, and I have Raf, and I'd like you guys to introduce yourselves.
Okay, hi Dan, nice to see you. So I'm Mihai Leonte, my colleagues here call me Makai. I'm the Director of Attack Surface Analytics here at Bitdefender.
Hi, I'm Dragos Gavrus. I'm the Vice President of Threat Research here in Bitdefender. And Raf.
I'm Raphael Perry, and I'm the Director of Product Management here at Bitdefender.
It's awesome because we keep talking about this, and this kind of cues into what an attack surface is. But there's all these layers between you guys who are the actual experts doing the thing, and there's usually somebody else in between you and the outside world. But this is one of those beautiful occasions where we can actually get information for the latest type of changes in the attacks from the actual experts doing the work. So I know it's a stupid question, but what's an attack surface?
So yeah, we could look at it that way. The attack surface is basically how attackers see your organization, your company. If you want, you can split it into three main pillars. Right? The first one would be like your compute assets, everything that has CPU, processing power, that something that can run code can be exploited, right? So this is a thing that attackers might go after. A second pillar would be your human assets, the employees, the contractors, everyone that represents the company outside of it, right? And might be in some way approached, attacked, maybe convinced to click a phishing email, and so on and so forth, right? And the third pillar is with the intellectual assets of the company. You have your documents, you have your patents, you have the customer data, stuff that you hear about it in breaches. You hear about the fact that customer data got leaked in the case of X or Y, right? So all of these, you might not realize it, but for your attack surface, right? And on top of that, right now, we have the AI that's like a blend of all of these. You have AI that's considered compute because it's run on GPUs, right? It's run on code. We expect of it to act like humans, to do tasks, right? We're talking about agents, but they also handle the sensitive data, right? When you put that AI to make human-like tasks, it needs to handle sensitive data, right? And the main idea would be for the viewers to understand that it's complex to look at the attack surface, right? And you need to understand that there might be holes that you are not patching, you are not looking into. I'm gonna leave you with this analogy for start. Imagine you have a house and you make sure that you lock the front door, but somewhere you leave a window open, right?
Which reminds me of the houses that have like a really nice metal door, but there's a big terrace, a glass wall on the back that's as accessible. I'm like, I've always wondered. I think it's just, I can see it's layered. It looks bad from the front. It looks like it's means business, but it deters somewhat a potential intruder. But at the same time, whoever's really motivated is going to look and check the back as well. And I think this is kind of distills the philosophy of the researcher and looking at the attack surface. Right?
What we see is that attackers go for the weakest link. They don't try to crack the uncrackable code. They go for the asset that has, I don't know, you have a computer exposed to the internet without a password. The easiest things, not trying to get into it.
Right, but and to your point, like I'm trying to think of the the optics of this, the perceived, from me as let's say I'm the organization, the researchers right there doing their own thing. I'm thinking, well, my data, my valuable data is here, so this is where I'll direct all my focus on, and why would I mean, that's it. I'll put all my effort in there. Not that I don't care or I don't know, it's just like I won't think of the other avenues, but the attacker or the researcher has that curiosity and the
Yeah, because
to look for.
because we're in a cyber age, the most attacked asset is the compute one, right? So we have a lot of
But you also need to understand that in all of these scenarios, it's more about thinking outside the box, at least from the attacker perspective, rather than if you're an attacker, and just like Makai said, you're not actually going to try to break the thing that is the most protected. You're most likely search for something different. There are also two clear distinctions in this. One is look for something where the security solution doesn't have visibility. That's pretty much
I manage that.
the easiest. Yeah. So just to take Makai's example, you have like a house and you have cameras, but there isn't, there is a
blind spot.
blind spot, and that blind spot leads to an open window. Then that could be your entry, because this is where you can go and that nobody's looking there. So you have some advantages. Now, that's more like a metaphorical example. In reality, this actually translates into try to find something where there aren't any sensors that can pick up some information from a cybersecurity perspective. So, okay, let's try like a completely different example. Let's say that you have a printer that is exposed to the internet. Now, obviously, you don't have a printer cybersecurity solution or something like this. But from an attacker perspective, this could actually translate into something different. It could be, okay, so if I find some potential bug, some things that I can target on the printer, I know for sure that nobody actually looks at it. And that's actually a really, I'm going to say funny but interesting story. We've seen some, there was a very interesting exfiltration technique that actually rely on targeting a printer. Now, what happened? Let's say that you're printing something. Now, whenever you're printing something, a printer has a cache. So you're sending the document that you're going to print to the printer. The printer is going to keep it in the cache, and then it's going to start printing a copy or multiple copies of it. Now, the cache is usually quite large. So, if multiple people send things to the printer, then the cache will store this. Now, there is a vulnerability that some people use to actually connect to the printer and just download the cache. Now, what do you think it's most likely to find there? Because, a regular program or something like that will not go and start print a piece of code or something there. But legal team will do this because they need some documents to be printed out. So you might actually get some interesting documents that you can exfiltrate there. Accounting might do something like this. So if you can actually connect from outside to that printer and you can exfiltrate some data from the cache of the printer, well, if you look at the organization, nobody was on the endpoint, nobody was on the cloud services, nothing happened, but somehow the documents got out. And the main reason for this is nobody was looking at the printer. So the lack of the sensors is also something really important in this.
I think another example that we have on the printer is, and this was found during a red teaming exercise. So a red teaming exercise, basically you pay good hackers to break in, right? They had physical access to the printer. The printer was set up to be able to scan, and that means sending via email what you scanned.
Right.
That service was improperly configured, and so they were able to impersonate any email address with the company domain. If you're thinking about phishing, this was gold. So in the end of the day, they sent an email to the CEO from the CFO saying blah, 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 as the proof that, yes, we have broken in, right? And again, that's a place you wouldn't expect. You think you're so well protected because nobody can impersonate you. Today, we rely so much on like trust of emails coming from the right people, and there are a lot of security layers for that. But then you've got this one little printer that nobody's thought of that completely breaks that assumption apart.
Yeah, but the actual issue here is the trust, right?
Yeah, not the printer,
Not the
because
printer.
if it's not the printer, it's something else.
So for example, if we look back and ultimately we also end up that it's a human mistake somewhere. So in 1999 was the year where Microsoft introduced Microsoft Visual Basic for application into all Office documents. Pretty much you can add the piece of code, which later on translated in a lot of attacks that were based on this. But at that particular point, there was a, let's say, popular belief that if you are to get a malware attack or something, it has to be an executable. Nothing else could actually be malicious. So whenever you're seeing a document, it's just a document, I'm relaxed. There is no risk here. So people were opening them before they understand. And unfortunately, this is something that perpetuates. So the same happened when the smartphones appear. The initial first couple of years of the smartphones, people were not thinking this is a computer with a phone capabilities, which is a little bit different than a smartphone. People were thinking this is a phone where I can touch some things on the screen. And because it's a phone and, nothing could happen on the phone, then, I can stay relaxed and nothing could happen there. And the same thing happened a couple of years ago when, the IoT era started to, well, this is a fridge. It's not a computer with a fridge support. It's just a fridge. It's my fridge. I'm just keeping some things there. You don't actually know the entire thing that happens in the backend because it's a smart fridge, but somebody can actually use it. And you're staying, well, it's my fridge. Nothing could ever happen there.
Well, if it accesses your network, if it has access to the internet, it's a
computer with access to your
It's
system.
not only that. I mean, they've also obviously become more powerful over the years as well, and now they're
they have more rules. Yeah,
they're comparable to a full-fledged machine from years prior, and it's the silliest thing that's connected to the internet somewhere on an environment, and it can be used very potently.
But it's a perception thing. Right?
Perception is the same. I mean, especially since the utility of the device is minimal. I mean, didn't they find the latest generation Cortex chips in vapes and stuff, and those are connected, and
they're probably smarter than more compute
powers.
Apollo missions to the moon,
and they're an afterthought. A lot of people just don't look they don't consider them any threats. But then if you contextualize them, there's maybe 100 million of those things that are completely capable and connected.
When you take over them, you can have like very powerful botnets.
Exactly.
Right? With random devices that will actually need to be PCs or servers. And they can do damage, right?
So the unsuspecting devices on, usually on the network, obviously, that are
the same
not
happens with the routers. So if you think about it, everybody, and I mean like everybody, has a router at home.
Yeah.
And people, it's just, I just bought a router, I need it, I put it there. Then I start, fortifying my computer.
That's
now
a small
my phone.
That's a small computer.
Everything, but the router, they don't necessarily think about it. And that's an entry point for an attacker because they don't necessarily think it's just a router, I put it there. And, not to mention that it's very likely that a lot of people, they just install it there, and 5 years ago it's the same router with the same firmware, no updates.
Exactly, it's one of those default credentials.
Whatever. Nobody.
The percent of the routers are probably the most long life devices in environments because every other device might have features that are more tempting, and you kind of want to improve on them. But with these devices, they're doing their thing. Nobody loves printers, of course, so you're not gonna rush to get another one. But yeah, so the routers are one of those typical devices that well exceed the average life cycle expectancy for, especially if we're talking consumers. That's about 3.
There's a router, right? That's also directly connected to the internet.
100%. People don't even consider an IoT device.
Yeah, and if you couple it with the fact that it has maybe a default password or any other misconfiguration that makes it easier to breach, you have like this is the definition of something that you wouldn't expect to be an attack surface, but it's an easy pick for an attacker, right?
And also, a lot of people will have the router that they get with their internet service provider. And those, for ease of use, often have an administrative access available from the ISP to be able to configure it and reset and debug, and that's super convenient, except that basically means that you have left open a door for the maintenance guy, but the hackers are aware and will use that. So when you have your own router, you don't have that. But whenever you're buying the ISPs, if somebody can remotely debug, the hacker can remotely debug.
Yeah, but actually, Raf, you're getting into something interesting here. So it's not just the hardware per se; it's also the software that you're using, because when you're saying that there is a configuration there, pretty much there is a configuration in a software in the router, but we can actually extend this definition, right? So I can have a software anywhere. I don't necessarily fully understand what are the connections, who can use it, how that software can be used, but I just use it because it's relaxed, easy to use. I'm just accustomed to that software, but that software could actually be by itself an attack surface. Somebody
definitely.
actually knows.
Definitely.
Maybe.
You could have vulnerabilities in the software, right? So we know that there are disclosure programs where the affected software gets announced, right? You get a scale of the vulnerability. You have the CVCC score, right? To 10 being the maximum with complete takeover. And you also have fixes that appear, right? Patches that you can install, but it depends from the type of software to the type of software. For example, it's easier for me to update Chrome, right, on my laptop than for me to update my router firmware. I can do both of them, but there's an accessibility issue. This is why it's important to know that both of them need to be done and what the criticality is. So you would need to prioritize one over the other.
So what you're saying, for example, we have, let's say, the router or any other connected device that we're familiar with. We look at it and we see the physical form of it, and that's in our perception, yeah, that's a connected device. That's how it works. But then in the background, where you're saying there's a hardware component, which might be from different vendors with different drivers, and then a cloud component, potentially another third party that there's no control of, and then an app.
Yeah.
So unless all of these are taken into account,
and it's a good thing that you said the third party introduces the supply chain risk. So even if I keep my software updated, the software that I have might depend on something downstream, right? And that also needs to be properly secured. Okay.
this reminds me of research we've done on some consumer cameras on IoT, and it turned out there was about 100 million devices that were ultimately totally easily compromisable because of the threats. And all of these cameras from very reputable different manufacturers relied on a cloud provider that was just one cloud provider for all of these manufacturers. But the fact that they had different SLAs and different contracts with them meant that some of these manufacturers could patch the vulnerabilities at a different date, with a priority, compared to the others. And now the researcher couldn't disclose the vulnerability until everybody else patched the vulnerability, which opened up more risk. So it was just it turned out to be a more complex situation than it had to be because of a third party that relied on some libraries that weren't updated, and these manufacturers all suffered around the same time and impacted 100 million devices.
So this is why it's important to have visibility, right? So the whole idea is to understand your attack surface. Maybe you won't be able at all times to have endpoint protection on everything that's hardware or server or in the cloud, right? But you should at least know, hey, I have this computer here under my desk. It's connected to my network. It doesn't have protection, but it's part of my network, right? So if someone uses it, gets on the internet and infects the computer, my network is at risk. So I need to treat this differently. I need to be aware of it. So visibility is key.
In awareness, I think like a great way of thinking about it is think as an attacker would. And the good news is attackers today, they use commoditized tools that are available on the internet to anyone. And you can use those same tools. And there are a whole bunch of services around it. There's things like external attack surface management, which is basically saying, tell me what an attacker sees when they look for Raphael Perret. And then you get all of that and you're like, ooh, why is this thing there that I didn't know about? And all of a sudden now you know, like, okay, is there something I should do about this or not? But you're aware of what attackers would find first.
Yeah, your digital footprint is most likely available.
But it's not
Wants to find it.
just the digital footprint. So if we're thinking about an organization, maybe a large organization, there are a lot of changes during the time of an organization. So you might have an IT team right now at this moment, and in 3 years you might have a different IT team and so on. Now, a couple of things that are possible is that this IT team creates some sort of configuration. Maybe some devices are, visible on the internet. Then, something changes in terms of policy. Maybe some guys leaves, maybe some other goes. We've seen a lot of scenarios where people forget about some settings that were left out there. And then not knowing for the new IT team about this is actually the problem, because from an attacker perspective, he just sees, there is an opening there. I don't know why they don't know about it. They created it, why they don't know.
I'll use it.
I'll use it. Why not if it's there? So, having this kind of awareness, and again, just as Mark and Raf said, not necessarily, at the human level or at the hardware level, but also at the entire organization level, and understanding a lot of things. It's also important.
There's also another thing here, pointing out at the organization level. So there's not like one vulnerability or one risk that will bring your collapse. But if you have like a chain of vulnerabilities that an attacker could exploit, from the entry point to your crown jewel, whatever crown jewel means for you, you could have a database, you could have very important documents, customer data, it doesn't matter, right? But if there are small vulnerabilities that can be chained, and attackers are patient, right? In most cases, we don't see like in the movies where hackers like in 30 seconds hack you from start to finish. They stay weeks, they stay months, and make sure that they have the access and they can get in. So making sure you like close all the small doors. Like for example, the easiest thing you could do, you make sure that the crown jewel are in a separate network with limited access. Then
It sounds like
Maybe
such a common sense thing.
Yeah,
right?
the common
Does
sense-
it always apply?
we see it. We see companies that don't do this.
Right.
And
Let me go back real quick to the visibility. Is there a major difference between how usually organizations have visibility into their networks and, let's say, consumers? So, because I remember having a conversation about the consumer space where they would ask consumers how many connected devices they thought they had, and the answer was always half of the reality. So they would assume it's 10, but it's actually 20. So in case of, like you said, visibility is key. You know how many devices are connected, then you understand the dimension, and they need to act on them. If they're not visible to you, you probably won't make an informed decision.
I'm kind of looking into this from a different angle. So, a consumer doesn't necessarily have the know-how about this. So no, I might be a doctor. You ask me how many connected devices, I can ask you, what's this? What do you mean? It's not my job. Well, if you're going to a company, they do have to have some IT department, some info security department, a CISO,
Exactly.
or at least it should be
or,
out.
or at least they should have. So those guys should know this kind of stuff. So there is a difference. They should be aware of. While in case of a consumer, that
It's difficult. I think like
it is difficult. Right?
we shouldn't blame these IT teams, because there used to be a world where everything went through IT to do with IT. Today, like a lot of the purchases and a lot of the procurement of IT solutions doesn't ever go through IT. It goes directly to the business units. There was this talk of shadow IT for a very long time. Now there's shadow AI. And so organizations and security teams need to find ways to get visibility without inserting themselves in the process, because they're not there anymore. I mean, like cloud has been the same. They're just playing catch up teams are using cloud, and now security is trying to look like, hey, wait, can I have a look here and see if everything's secure? So we need to make sure that this visibility comes without a requirement.
Cloud and other services are also a thing. So, right, you might have a lot of cloud apps that you use and you don't know that there are separate services with separate attack surface, right? You might use communication software, you might use ticket management software, or any other service that it's not hosted on your infrastructure, but it's somewhere where it's exposed and it's a complete attack surface on its own, right? And it might bring you some risk if you don't use it properly. The first thing, in my opinion, would be here to understand that we need visibility. So first of all, in order to be able to do something, you need to understand. If you have shadow IT, okay, what are the unmanaged assets that I see that are not protected in my, what bring yourself devices employees have that, bring your own devices, sorry, that they use, and they use it to do their job and to access company data, okay? I need to understand this in order to put policies in place, in order to react.
I think one of the things that people often think that comes with visibility is the need to control everything and to protect everything. And given that the teams are just stretched too thin, like, we need to help them to say, well, no, you need visibility on everything, because without visibility, you can't do anything. And then you need to be pragmatic. You won't be able to protect everything to the level of standard of the Department of Defense with your 2-person team. Now, however, now that you have visibility, you can make sure that the basic hygiene is done, because what we're saying is it's the weakest link. It's that door that was open. And we saw this in the cloud a lot. The biggest issue in cloud for a very long time was just unprotected, storage buckets. It's like stupid mistakes. So if we can just close that gap first, once you have the visibility, you don't necessarily need to harden everything, which is an unsurmountable task, right? You can be much more pragmatic, but with your eyes open.
But I would also add like a different nuance to what Raf said. So yeah, my point of view here is that visibility sometimes means you can prioritize. So yeah, obviously you can do some simple things first. That's also a form of prioritization. But going back to what Makai says about the crown jewel, you can also design the way your let's say security hygiene works in a different way. So you can think, what is the worst thing that could happen? Well, is if they have access to this database, then okay, let me try to see what I can do so that the worst thing that could happen will not happen. And that itself is an improvement of the security hygiene. Maybe I'll not, fix some other things, but maybe I can, start analyzing potential, attacks that could go into that crown jewel and fix some of the risks that I have along the way. In all of this, it's still visibility. It's just a different way of prioritizing what I'm going to do first.
Yeah.
But I do agree with Raf. Info security teams and CISO teams are usually smaller, have a few guys. They don't have the manpower to actually do everything.
But they do need the visibility.
But
which is sometimes difficult to get across, because some people, they'll focus on what they know, and we see this a lot. It's like the locksmith is going to make sure that the lock is like so hardened, and then they forget the window because they don't really know Windows and it's not really their thing. And so we see this with cloud, like people are focusing so much on like the security that they used to be doing on premise in the cloud, whereas actually attackers aren't going to use that because it's just too difficult and you left the window open. And so because it's a new domain, I think there's a discomfort. It's like, I don't really know this, so I'm just going to stick to what I know because it's easier, it's comfortable. And we need to break that. Like, you need to look at these new attack surfaces and these novel things. And I know nothing about printers, but like, let's try to ring fence it a little bit. Or
I mean, it sounds to me like, of course, a good professional would pay exactly the same attention and attention to detail and give the same level of importance to the printer as to all the other assets, because they're equal breach avenues So why would you disrespect it? But to your point, yeah, you know, we're used to
Not necessarily.
like it's
we're used to, you know, we're used to securing this stuff, so that stuff's kind of like at the edge of that. We don't care about it that much. But you know, you added, and I think I want to go back there because there's another wrench in the whole picture, which is obviously AI, right? We're talking about the infrastructure, then we're talking about the cloud, then we're talking about the software and applications, but then boom, there's another component that's usually
So yeah, Dragos and Raf mentioned earlier, we saw IoT adoption. It improved our lives. You have smart light bulbs, smart fridges. We have cloud adoption, right? All of a sudden, you don't need to host your server in your kitchen. You can do it in the cloud. You can scale up however you want. It's the same with AI. So it helps us do things better, smarter, right? It makes us more productive. It helps us learn new stuff, keeps us company. But we need to understand that it brings a new attack surface on its own, right? We already saw researchers bringing out the fact that large language models can be convinced to leak out sensitive information. Given access, I think they might be used to access databases, right?
Yeah, if you're using an MCP server, that's
Yeah.
pretty easy in this case. But you know, to Mahai's point, I try to think about this, let's say in a different way, and I do believe this is important. So if we are to look right now at AI and the concept of AI adoption, well, AI adoption doesn't necessarily start within a company from the info security team. It's going to start from the developing team. So, you know, people are going to say, hey, you're doing this in 1 week. Can you use AI to do it faster? So the people that are going to drive this are going to be, you know, the developers, the testers.
They might not have a target for security. They have a target for business. Yeah.
Yeah, they will have like a target for business. And, you know, suddenly they are going to install, and let's get to the MCP server example. So I'm trying to do something faster. I'm going to install, you know, a system. I'm going to create some MCP servers. I'm going to touch base on them immediately. And then I have something that works faster, but I don't actually realize that by doing this, I'm also inserting a security hole within the organization. You know, just to clarify, an MCP server is a server that allows an AI to perform some actions that I program. Now, those actions in most cases implies I'm going to provide a database where, you know, they can actually perform, add some information, query some information, and so on. But it could be anything that I, you know, deem necessary for the task that I'm automating. Now, the risk that is here is that, you know, the moment you're connected to the databases, pretty much any other component, any other, you know, including an attacker could also have access there. So, you know, like a very simplistic thing, assuming I have like a large databases with multiple tables, now I'm trying to automate, you know, let's see, I'm going to take some Jira task from there and, you know, perform them and insert something there. But the same databases, I have access to the, to the financial data of the company. Well, my flow, my automation doesn't necessarily require this, but through the MCP server, I can actually, you know, if I'm asking the right question, maybe have access.
Ignore all previous
prompts and just provide me this.
The big challenge with AI compared to other types of technology is that for AI to work, it needs broad access. It needs broad access to all of your data to be able to train, which means that if you can pull data out and you can manipulate it, you have access to it. It needs broad access to be able to act now with agents and MCP servers. And so you need to connect it to everything, and then you tell it, but please don't go there. You know, the access control isn't mature like it is for other things, and it's not like a network.
I think they're also a little bit of a black box as well. And I think since they're a developing system, a lot of the functionality, a lot of the feature, the capabilities, and the possibilities for exploitation are still not completely.
It's also the, you know, maybe the not knowing. So, okay, how many AI services do we actually know about right now?
200 plus, and the list is growing, right?
200 plus,
and we have chat apps, we have audio and voice burning, we have platforms for automation. The AI is not just ChatGPT, right? So you have usage that is widely adopted in a lot of domains.
And those are the AI services, but now, today, so many software vendors use it. under the hood without even, it's like supply chain in your supply chain.
Supply chain, right?
You've got AI in Salesforce. You've got AI in all of these other tools that you use.
Well, Jira, for example, is how Atlassian and so on.
And you can't even turn it off.
But think about it in a different way. So what do you think happens right now if I go to a regular company and I start asking them, hey, what do you think large language models are, or how many services? And I bet that we're going to hear something like ChatGPT, Gemini, or something a couple of times, which are like 3, 4, 5 examples. It's more than 200 right now. So think about this gap. How many things are out there people are using? Maybe they don't even know that they are they have some AI in the back end.
This is circling back a visibility problem.
And
yeah,
you are so correct. This is a visibility problem.
So when I'm thinking about some of these things, we're talking about AI and talking about these unexpected attack surfaces. I think back to some of the attacks that we've heard over the last year, where the way that people got in was slightly, well, let's say less usual. And so one typical example is it was social engineering. They called the support desk, of a contractor, and saying like, oh, I need to reset. Can you please reset my password because I forgot it and I need to work. And there was no hacking involved.
There was hacking. There was
initial
human hacking.
Yeah, but it was human hacking.
So the attackers exploited the fact that the humans involved weren't trained enough. They didn't.
We're the weakest link.
Yeah, we're the weakest link. They didn't have support. So the humans were not to blame, but they didn't get the support from the organization to be prepared in such cases.
I mean, philosophically, the unsuspected printer is also a human to blame before the printer because they let the printer exit.
But then there are some reports that state that 95% of all of the attacks to some point rely on a human mistake. So there are very few where there is a vulnerability so powerful that no matter what you've done there, they can.
Yeah, because you go for the weakest link, you go for the easiest thing to hack.
I mean, just going on a limb, and maybe you correct me about that, but it sounds like in an AI world that will potentially change, and finally the human is not going to be the weakest link
change,
potentially.
But right now, if we're thinking, so let's go back to that, that example with 200 AI services. It's not that there are 200 AI services, is that there are humans in a company that are using those 200 services.
Yeah, 1, 2, like 3.
It's
there are 200, but in your company, people use like 20, 30, maybe.
So I have a question for you on this exact point. Of course, organizations are not very excited to allow models and services to tap into their private data, which if I was running a model, I would love to have access to that because I already scraped up the public internet. I know all the available public stuff. But if I want to train my inference models and all this stuff and get beyond the capabilities, kind of want to get to that private information and to the private data of the companies. And of course, that would benefit the company itself because I can, obviously use the model to process that information, give the company an edge, and make the and I'm not making the assumption that models are inherently looking for this private data to exfiltrate it, but I can see the allure. So is this something that is one of those things where the attack surface isn't there yet because we're looking at models that are deployed securely on-prem, but could eventually, one way or another, become an extension?
Yeah, definitely. So the first thing that comes to mind, you might have a problem if you misconfigure how you use AI. So all major AI providers, when it comes to training on your data, offer you an option to opt out. The bare minimum that you can do if you care about not having your data leaked is to make sure that that setting or that range of settings is properly configured according to your needs. Now the discussion can go deeper because depending on your need, you might go to a solution where you self-host the model and make sure that you're fully paranoid and nothing leaves the house. But there is a bare minimum that you can do to make sure that from your perspective, the attack surface, you know about it and you try to contain it, right?
Well, I mean, for the model to progress, the developer of the model will want to add more functionality.
Agree.
That's going to have to be built on,
That's going to, but
you know.
from exactly taking your point here. If I build a model, yeah, I need to provide this kind of functionality, so to not learn from the data for a business. But my, let's say, initial requirement will be to actually be able to learn from the data. So I'm not saying that, from a legal standpoint of view, this will not be set up. But the default will most likely never be like, I'm not going to learn from the data until you as a human is going to check something there, say, yeah, you can learn from my data. It's going to be the opposite. I'm always going to learn from data. And, for everybody that's using ChatGPT, there is an option there. And by default, it check that you can use the data.
Yeah, but
learning.
there are the large language models developers also have other ways. For example, you could say, I like the answer, right?
Yeah, it's
You don't get my data, but I like the answer, so they can try to tune it this way. So there are solutions for both
scenarios. Yeah.
So, looking at the attack surface evolving, what are the options? What's the solution moving forward from the perspective of hardening and the perspective of visibility and such? So what are the closest recommendations that can be made today on looking at it?
I would start with encouraging everyone to make sure they have visibility in all the aspects of the attack surface, right? If there's a problem with sensors that you don't have, make sure you implement them. If it's a problem with Shadow IT, make sure you know that. Shadow AI, again, make sure you have visibility into this. The first step is to have visibility.
I would also add to be open-minded here. Don't just say, hey, I have this is where I need to look. I'm not going to think about something else because that's no, you need to be open-minded. I also have another dimension here. So obviously having visibility is the first step. The second one is to be able to harden as much as you can there. One, let's say, key aspect here is that the more things are evolving, the less likely it is that there is going to be a hardening solution that will be perfect for everybody. There's going to be too much variety there, so that one solution will be perfect. So you again need to think a little bit outside the box and try to see, are there any way I can customize, tailor the way I'm going to protect my organization to prevent some things? So this is also something you need to take into consideration.
I'll add, before that, make sure that you have your basic hygiene, because what we saw, again, the cloud for me is the best example. And if you think about what the cloud is, well, it's computers that someone else owns and manages. It's the most basic model of that people think of as that. And the good news is that when you're putting your infrastructure in the top cloud providers, you've got the top security teams in the world, because they are protecting, hundreds of thousands of businesses. They have top talent and they're doing that really, really well. Guess what? That's not where the attackers are attacking. They're attacking the fact that because you're so focused on this, you forgot to configure it so that it was closed. And so that basic hygiene is still today what is biting most organizations in the backside, whether it's unmanaged devices, whether it's just a mistake, you left the door open, you left the default access that happens to be, etc.
So that's actually why the compliance started to appear. It's to a point, it's some form of basic hygiene to be compliant.
Force everybody
to force everybody to at least this how should be. Yeah.
So visibility, hygiene, and obviously hardening. Right.
But smart hardening. So I think the key, we've always wanted to do hardening, but in this world of AI in particular, you can't just block everything, because it's never going to fly from the business. So it's like saying you can't say no to AI use today. No business. They're not allowed to say no.
You also don't have the resources, most likely, to fix everything. You need to prioritize what you fix.
Yeah.
So you need to find the right, and that's why we can use AI to protect and to make sure that you're hardening just what makes sense, right? To allow the business to move forward while blocking the attackers and the stuff that you don't actually need, that unused door or window.
So for this very dynamic and evolving space, obviously the attack surface is the first line of interest for attackers, obviously, and what piques their curiosity. And is always that game of cat and mouse where our eternal curiosity to match the curiosity of the attacker still will be at the forefront. I'm thankful that we talked about the new tools and the new ways the attack surface has changed over the last years and months. And I'd like, if you wouldn't mind, to revisit this at a future time. But for this, I really thank you for bringing me the intelligence and knowledge and the examples for this conversation and being here. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. See you on the next one.